Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. I have already put out my video on patch 3.27, day 9 of teaser season, and Granny Gear Games decided, let's not just throw out some more information, but let's throw out the single biggest information dump that we've had. Welcome to a discussion of the new Assassin. Now, unfortunately, I have a very limited amount of time to go through this. This means that this video is going to be less edited than usual, so I apologize in advance for that. You will probably encounter a couple of little mistakes as a result of that. Also, it's going to take a while to formulate firm opinions on some of these things. So we'll compare to what exists at the moment, but there's undoubtedly going to be more information that will come out over time. Some of the first impressions will end up not standing the test of time all that well. Let's start with the most exciting of all of the notables, and this is Infused Toxins. This is something that was previously available on the Ruthless exclusive version of the Assassin. Ruthless has different Ascendancy notables, and generally speaking, they're the same thing but worse than what's available in the base game. However, there was one very important exception, and that was the Assassin. And there was an option there available, all damage from hits can poison. This is really, really good. There's so many things it can do. You can play a Tri-Elemental Poison Bow build, you can play a Tri-Elemental Poison Claw build, although that could potentially have been made with a Pneumatic Dagger otherwise. But potentially most interesting, you can also play a poison-based elemental spellcaster, and Infused Toxins is there to cover that for you. This is not a 4-point node in Ruthless, but it is in the base game. However, it's behind something that would have been a must-take anyway. It's behind Toxic Delivery. So if you're interested in playing one of these poison spellcaster builds, it comes online once you get your second Labyrinth, and so that's something you can consider playing from the back half of the axe. That one is definitely very, very exciting there. Let's go through something, though, that is fundamentally unchanged, except for the fact that it is better numerically than what it used to be. Let's discuss Mistwalker. Gain elusive on critical strike, unchanged from the live version of the game. 100% increased elusive effect. Now, this is 50% in the base game. We'll come back to the exact details of that in a sec. You take no extra damage from critical strikes while elusive. This is unchanged. It's slightly better than it was before, because the uptime is going to be slightly higher on having the elusive buff. So, a recap on how elusive works. When you earn elusive, it starts at a very high percentage effect. It'll be 100% by default, but in the case of the Assassin, it's going from 150% up to 200%. This gives you a chance to avoid damage from hits, and it gives you a boost to your movement speed. At this point, it is going to be a massive 60% increased movement speed, and 30% chance to avoid all damage from hits. But this is going to scale down, and it's not able to be refreshed. So once you've got an elusive buff, you're kind of stuck with it for a while. The key thing that elusive is doing here, once you land your first critical strike in a fight, which for an assassin is often going to be your very first hit, you're then going to be fast for a short period of time. That's going to help you get away if you want to get away, or it's going to help you finish off the enemy, and it's going to help you avoid any of their initial counterattacks. However, as the elusive counter ticks down, it's going to get worse and worse until eventually it reaches a point that you've basically got no elusive left. Once elusive completely falls off, then Mistwalker's doing nothing for you, but gain elusive on critical strike will probably proc pretty quickly, and so most of the time you will have the powerful defensive benefits of taking no additional damage from critical strikes. Very, very important caveat on this though. Very important caveat. You will often find that the most dangerous thing a monster does is its very first hit on you. And that very first hit on you, especially if you're unaware of the monster, that is going to potentially not have this. You take no additional damage from critical strikes active. So keep that in mind, it's pretty scary. All that said, Mistwalker is better than it was. It was already usable. It was not great, but it was usable. It's going from usable to quite good. And as a result, I expect a lot of people are going to default to wanting this on their Assassin, but there's lots and lots of other options now as well. So next we have Shadowed Blood. Shadowed Blood is a complicated node. It does two things that work differently for different types of build. Unaffected by damaging ailments is really, really strong if you're playing an energy shield build. So this is going to turn off all bleed, all ignite, and all poison on you. However, it's something that's a little bit weaker on life builds some of the time. But at the same time, it does have a fair bit of synergy with the other line of text on it. 40% of physical damage taken recouped as life. Obviously, this does nothing if your primary resource for absorbing damage is going to be your energy shield pool. But if you do have a substantial life pool, even if it's as a hybrid build, then this is going to be live text. When you take a big hit, 40% of the physical damage being recouped, a lot of the time at endgame, things that will kill you will be barrages of small hits, where each individual hit is amplified by a map modifier that might read 170% of physical damage added as extra fire. Those sorts of things can be quite scary. However, where does Shadow Blood really, really shine? Where is it at its best? It's when you're playing with Petrified Blood. If you're using Petrified Blood, then Shadow Blood is really good. If you're not using Petrified Blood, I think this is going to be a miss for most people. Lastly, someone's going to live the dream. Someone is going to do something really mad with this, and the fact that unaffected by damaging ailments means unaffected by Ignite. Unaffected by Ignite means that you can potentially reflect Ignites onto yourself and then proliferate them onto your newfound friends, aka enemies. This is something that is usually done on the Chieftain Ascendancy. There's lots of good reasons it's best on the Chieftain, but if you wanted to live the dream and make this work on an Assassin, all power to you, I say. Next, we have the new Noxious Strike and Toxic Delivery. So this is actually changing. We no longer have a Noxious Strike. We now have Infused Toxins instead. We've already talked about that. I would possibly use slightly different wording for this. Grinding Gear games have the wording, all damage from hits can poison. The way that I prefer to word this is your cold, lightning, and fire damage can poison, as though they were chaos or physical damage. That, I think, makes it clear that you still need to invest in poison chance. You can get that from the Septic spells notable on the passive tree, or you can get it from a number of other sources, depending also on whether you're playing an attack build or a spell build. Toxic Delivery is a bit different to what it used to be. It's 20% more damage for poisons you inflict with critical strikes. Now, previously, you were able to get 25% of this stat, but it was spread across two notables. So you had poisons you inflict with critical strikes deal 25% more damage, and then you also had this notable for duration here, 5% increased poison duration for each poison you have inflicted recently. That is unchanged. That stat still there. And recover 0.5% of your life per poison that affects enemies you kill. Now that is also something that's unchanged from the old Noxious Strike. So essentially, old Noxious Strike and Toxic Delivery, most of those, but not quite all, and this critical strike chance here is quite important. That's not going in there. But most of the things that made up the old Assassin's Poison nodes, they're still there. They're just consolidated into just one node. So if you're wanting to play a Poison build, Toxic Delivery, take this at your first Labyrinth. Second Labyrinth, Infuse Toxins if it's relevant to your build. Otherwise, take something else. And then there's lots of other things to choose between. After this, we have Opportunistic. Now, Opportunistic used to be a 2-point notable. I believe Opportunistic was directly connected. Damage from your crits can't be reflected, and it still has that line. 25% more damage when there is at most one rare or unique enemy nearby, and 35% less damage taken when there are at least 2 rare or unique enemies nearby. These numbers used to be worse. These numbers used to be 20 and 25%. What do I think about the new Opportunistic? It's a 4-pointer now, so it's more of an investment, but it is very strong. It's giving you a lot there. However, the drawback to it is that I don't like this thing where the defensive aspect of it, which is phenomenal, 35% is massive, but the defensive aspect is just not up a lot of the time. It's up in certain moments, it's down in others. I find this notable is one of those things that it's always good for you, but it's not always doing what you want it to do. So this is something to take if you've got the points available, but I don't think you want to rely on this 35% less damage taken. Even though 35% less damage is absolutely phenomenal, it's just not always going to be there when you need it. Next, we have the enemies on low life and the enemies not on low life selector node. Here you get to choose between Knife in the Back and For the Jugular. They do the same thing fundamentally, but they do it in slightly different ways. Do you want to crit more often against enemies that are on high life, or do you want to crit harder against enemies that are on high life? And then whichever one you don't pick, you're then going to get that for enemies that are on low life. My default suggestion here, if you are dealing elemental damage on your character and ailments are a thing for you, so for instance, you want to inflict freezes on enemies, then definitely pick Knife in the Back. Knife in the Back is also really good in conjunction with Herald of Ice. This is going to allow you to freeze weak enemies on the first hit quite reliably, because you're going to have so much critical strike chance when you first hit those enemies. On the flip side, if you want to just try and one-shot enemies, then For the Jugular is going to be the way to go. Ultimately, both of these are good. I would lean towards Knife in the Back if you are dealing cold damage or if you're dealing lightning damage. I would lean towards For the Jugular if you're dealing any other damage type, but play around with both of them, swap between them as you need to. They do fundamentally the same thing. This is just a pure power node that you're probably going to want to take on any critical strike build. Okay, so now we're going to come down to the bottom cluster, and this time I'm going to move my face out of the way. So here we have Unstable Infusion is the gateway to this cluster. Unstable Infusion, 15% chance to gain a power charge on a critical strike, 30% on a non-critical, +1 maximum power charges. If you are looking to land those critical hits reliably, this is going to be essential. Now, existing Unstable Infusion is just 50% lower versions of these numbers. So it's 20% is going up to 30, 15 is from 10. How much of a difference is this at endgame? Basically nothing. This is existing Unstable Infusion at endgame. However, there is part of the game before you get to endgame, and that is when you're going through the axe. This is going to be a much better node in the axe than it is now. And I think that might be something that they're trying for here. I think Grinding Gear Games are going out of their way to make the assassin perform a bit better earlier in progression. After this, we have a couple of options that you can go for, but these are 2 pointers that I don't think everyone is going to want. Firstly, we have Mystical Infusion. Base spell critical strike chance of spells is equal to that of your main hand weapon. May I introduce you to Sandstorm Visage. This helmet is extremely popular and it has this line of text as the reason people use it. Base spell critical strike chance of spells is equal to that of your main hand weapon. However, Sandstorm Visage has one additional line of text that kind of bricks a lot of builds. Cannot deal critical strikes with attacks. So, have you ever wanted to play a Sandstorm Visage build that uses cast on critical strike support? Well, if you have, then this is the notable for you. Also, this setup is going to be best friends forever with the very, very rare, very, very powerful Beano's Kitchen Knife. Why do I say this? Beano's Kitchen Knife has very high intrinsic critical strike chance on it. We're talking 11.2 to 12% base critical strike chance. So if you're wanting to play a melee cast on critical strike chance build, that is definitely something that is going to work for you. It also has poison pseudo-proliferation. On killing a poison enemy, nearby enemies are poisoned and nearby allies regenerate some life as well. I'll leave aside the life regen, that's a bonus, but it's not the reason you're using it. Killing a poison enemy, the poison spreads. A copy of the biggest individual poison on it is placed on a nearby enemy with a fresh duration of 2 seconds. Well, Mystical Infusion works really, really, really well in conjunction with this, especially if you go up the top and take Toxic Delivery and Infused Toxins. So if you want to play something that is completely impossible in 3.26 and that might be really interesting, you'll play a Beano's Kitchen Knife, cast on critical strike spell build that is unleashing a spell payload that is able to poison because of Infused Toxin, that gets really long poisons because of Toxic Delivery, gets a bunch of extra damage because of Toxic Delivery, has a whole bunch of power charges, so you're actually inflicting critical strikes because of Unstable Infusion, and then Mystical Infusion comes along and means that you can use some of those spells that are very hard to critically strike with, and you can get those to actually inflict critical strikes, which then means that you could potentially use the perfect Agony Keystone if you wanted to do so. So this is empowering new builds. Will that be any good? I have no idea. Probably not, but at the very least, it's something that could be interesting to try. Warning though, warning. Beano's Kitchen Knife is the same rarity tier as Mage Blood. If this ends up being a very strong setup, then it's also going to be a very expensive setup because Beano's Kitchen Knife is not easy to come by. Okay, so you don't want to go with Mystical Infusion? Well, you've also got the option of Deathmarked. Deathmark is one that will trigger level 30 Assassin's Mark on attack critical strikes against a rare or unique enemy when you have no mark. Your mark skills cost no mana, and the marked enemy cannot evade attacks. This is definitely doing a lot of work for you. And most notably, I think that this is a problem solver. Most people aren't going to want this, but if you're playing a build that just cannot deal with the mana cost of a mark skill that is being triggered by mark on hit, then this is going to provide that solution for you. Anyways, that is the new Assassin. I think there are a lot of things that you could build around this. If you want to go with something that is more stock standard, I think there's definitely a lot of room to make this into an attack poison build, or to make this into a critical strike spellcaster, or to make this into a critical strike attack build. However, if you want something that's weird, you could definitely take Mystical Infusion and Infused Toxins together and put together something that is cast on critical strike, but has the abilities of Sandstorm Visage without the drawbacks thereof. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.